Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. So our guest today is Marc Magerman, a good friend of mine from one of my favorite places in America, Boston. He was an early adopter with Five Guys, took a relatively small investment to open up a Five Guys, and then parlayed that into a dozen locations and created a business that he sold for a life-changing amount of money, which is amazing. One of the things that I like even more than that is now his next chapter is he's a franchise success coach, helping other franchisees have the same experience that he has. So welcome, Marc.
Dan, thank you very much for being here. Really feel honored to be part of it. Thanks.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your willingness to sort of open up and to be helpful for future franchisees and also franchisors. I mean, in a perfect world, every franchisor has 100 marks, right? So, I mean, that's the name of the game. But how about in your own words, like what's your background and what's your story and how did you even get into Five Guys? What did you do before Five Guys?
I was I started out like everybody else out of college, corporate America, got in the marketing advertising world and did pretty well and was making a nice living and um, decided at some point in the late 90s that I wanted to kind of be my own boss. I wanted to be entrepreneurial. I learned a lot and I ended up buying a small little marketing advertising company and was running it out of my basement. And, I had some personal situations too, Dan. My kids were getting older and they were getting more involved in life. And I was in a corporate world where I was on a plane all the time and my time wasn't my own. And I just felt like I wasn't putting my best foot forward as a dad either. So, small business ownership seemed to give me that quality of life that I was looking for. And it did for a while. And then I, got in touch with a couple of friends of mine who are also business guys. And we started saying, well, what do we want to do together? We wanted to find something to do together, maybe on a larger scale. And we did a lot of homework and did a lot of consultating with people. And at the end of the day, we just kept getting attracted to franchising. Just, we didn't know anything about it, but we just, my partner, Peter, who I know Dan, very bright guy, Harvard MBA, and learned a lot from him. And just, he was really enamored by just the concept of franchising in general, which is find people who are doing something really, really well and overlay your business acumen on top of it and have a nice partnership. So, a shout out here to you. We started our investigation into franchising opportunities, and lo and behold, we came upon Five Guys Burgers and Fries, which I know you were a major part of the when that started up. And we started the process with you. You introduced us to the franchisor, and we were intrigued by it. And I don't know if you want me to spend too much time talking about the history of Five Guys, but they did it right as a franchisor.
Go for it. Yeah, it's a lesson for other franchisors.
Right. They built their own restaurants. And I believe it was 3 of them that they operated for like 15 years. They perfected it. Right. I mean, I can remember shaking the fry basket 16 times, not 18, not 14. And then they decided, they want to make this go national. And they were based in the the mid-Atlantic states, and then they started going nationally. Our timing was great, so a lot of it is luck, I have to say. But you pointed us in the right direction. We did our homework with them. Kind of asterisk here, validation, which is a major step in franchise acquisition. My partners and I took a list of their franchisees, and I think we each called 40 of them and validated what they had said to match up what the Five Guys folks had said. And lo and behold, early 2000s, we put together a partnership team and we signed to do a multi-unit business up in the Massachusetts area. And that's how we got started. And it was a life-changing decision as we look back, 18 years later.
So you talk to the existing franchisees. I'm surprised how few people do that. And it's
which is amazing.
I would never buy a franchise without talking to, I want to know 2 things. Is corporate still opening more stores because they know more than any of us? And with the franchisees, are they glad that they're doing this? Are they going to keep opening more? And if the franchisor is not building, franchisees aren't building, run for the hills, save your money. It's more fun to light your money on fire. But So how big was Five Guys when you got in?
Our first restaurant in Marlborough, Massachusetts in 2008 was 402.
Okay. So you were, okay.
So
So it wasn't quite a startup, but
no, so it
402.
wasn't a startup, but I would say that when we first started our conversations with Five Guys, because again, you don't open up your first restaurant a week after being introduced to the concept, right? There's a
Sure.
whole process there. I think it was a 2-year process, maybe
Yeah.
even longer. And when we signed up when we really got interested in them, they had about 112 stores. So you can see what the growth of Five Guys was back in the late 2000s,
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
2010s.
Well,
So it wasn't a startup, but it was out in our area because we were the third or second in all of New England to open up, I believe.
hmm.
And, um, just kind of a funny story as it's kind of getting to there. As we were doing our due diligence and our homework, I had to go from Boston all the way out to Avon, Connecticut, because that's where the closest one was. So we were also excited. And these are another thing that comes into play when you're looking at buying into a franchise is what was the landscape like? We knew that Five Guys was really successful where they were, but we had a whole territory that was available. So we got in a good time to actually carve out our territory with them. And once we opened up the first one, it was uh, fantastic in terms of the growth and how quickly we were able to put them together. We opened up 13 restaurants in 5 years, which nowadays would be pretty hard to do, I think. But back then we were able to get that done.
Yeah, we'll go through that because you guys, I don't know to the penny, but you guys didn't start with a ton of capital. You didn't put a ton of money into it, but you let it parlay and you let it compound. So why don't you run through the story of like what you did, how long it took, and then we'll get into lessons and stuff like that.
Sure. Um, from a basic standpoint, you have to come up with uh, your startup costs and your franchise fee. You have to meet the franchisor's requirements. And we signed up to do 20 locations. So we had to come up with somewhere around $800,000 when you factor in 20 locations times X plus the first franchise fee. Your development fees included in there. Um, Obviously, you need to have some money available as you're building to sort of weather the storm. We all had we had 3 partners, 4 at the time. We all had full-time jobs, so we didn't need the business to generate any income. And one of the things that we decided as a partnership group, Dan, which I think is really important, um, we made a decision that we weren't going to take a dollar of equity out of the business for any reason other than taxes for 7 years.
Hmm.
Because, and again, I'm going to give kudos to you on this because you were the one that kind of walked us through the model, which is you're not getting into this to build one anything. You're getting in it to build a business, and you want the success of the business to springboard into the success of secondary and tertiary locations. So we followed that model. Luckily for us, and again, a lot of it, at the end of the day, you can sit there and pat yourself on the back if you want, but a lot of it's luck. Five Guys was just a phenomenal business for us. My partner Peter has a joke that the business plan for successful Five Guys businesses is 3 steps: key and lock, turnkey, open door. Haha, kind of tongue in cheek, but it really was that. It was
Yeah.
a phenomenon when it opened. So
We all got lucky with Five Guys. They were fanatical about operations. There's only a couple things on the menu,
yeah,
and their thing is do it right 100% of the time in 100% of the circumstances. No matter what, make those fries perfect, make the burger perfect. And guess what? There's 2,000 locations around the world. Like that's
right.
it.
It's
Like they
they were completely right about
yeah,
it.
and I remember early on, people would sort of poke fun at those guys for just being so relentless about operations. And it's like that's the difference. Like there were so many when Five Guys started. Remember all these other better burger guys? They're all gone. They're all gone. Five Guys is the only one that keeps growing.
There's a
They're all
reason,
tanking.
and as operators, I'll be honest with you, we didn't like those guys very much. Like leave us alone. We didn't when we first started, we were a little bit naive, and we didn't really understand why you're being so fanatical about shaking the fry basket 16 times. Um, but we understand why, and they had a really hard job, I think, because if they couldn't really allow one franchisee to kind of go off rogue, so that's a tough job. So I
Yeah.
ended up having a ton of respect for them, even though we didn't necessarily get on each other's dance cards maybe in the first couple of years.
Now, I
But
remember early on, like they were so fanatical about bread, getting the bread to every location. The bread makes the sandwich, right? So, or like the level of the way you articulate how crispy the bacon is supposed to be, like all those things matter. There's only a
it,
couple
it,
of things
it
on the matter on the menu. Has got to be perfect. Hey, so
absolutely.
so so what did you learn? So like, so it's safe to say you guys invested 800 grand or, less than a million. You parlayed that into 15, 20 million, whatever size company you built, and you sold sales, and then you sold the company.
Mhm.
But, would love to hear your thoughts on what you did well, what you didn't do well, what took you a while to finally start doing well, but like give advice to some newbies of
Yeah,
how to be more successful faster.
it's unfortunately, I think ego gets in the way sometimes when you're successful in whatever walk of life you're doing. And we had some successful business people on our team. And if I recall, um, I'll back up a little bit. Our plan was never to be involved full time in this business. It was to be investors and hire people to run the business.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized that this could have been mistake number one, which was not have an owner involved in the business. Um, we ultimately took a step back and said, you know what, maybe we're going to hire a really good general manager who might be able to help us open the first restaurant and run it really well. And he may even be able to do a second one or may be able to bring in an apprentice and run this too. But we took a step back and said, but who's going to run the business? Who's going to be responsible for getting to the fact that we have a 20 store territory with a timeline on it? So we ultimately decided that one of us as a partner who's vested interest, who's put their hard-earned money into the business, should be involved. Is sort of like in a CEO or COO role. Um, it turned out to be me. Could have been any of us, but it turned out to be me. I think we had a line, and they said, if you want to volunteer, take a step forward. And the other guys took a step back. So I was standing there as the guy doing it. It's kind of a joke. But I sold my small little business. I got involved. And once we had an owner who was involved in um, at the top of the business, uh, things really started accelerating for us because then we were able to put a business plan together. There was accountability that I had. I was accountable to my partners. Things started soaring there. So for a multi-unit franchise, make sure an owner is involved in some capacity, even if it's not full time. We learned that lesson. The other lesson we learned, which was a little harder, was the franchisor knows more than you do about their concept. And it took us a while for us to realize that. So we had a couple of missteps along the way where we said, you know what? I'm trying to think of a good example. Nothing was really overly expensive at Five Guys, but maybe we used a cheaper version of paint on the walls or something, and we were like, how do we save money? Because they don't care about our bottom line, we do. So let's make some decisions that we think are right. And every single time we did, it was the wrong decision, and we ultimately realized why theirs was right. So the advice I always would give to people would be, don't get involved in a franchise concept if you feel you know more about the concept than they do.
Otherwise, do
And
your own thing.
yeah, do your own thing. And there's plenty of people who do. And you got to kind of tuck your humility in the back seat a little bit because they're telling you how to do it. And if you're not willing to listen and learn, you really shouldn't be. And again, we got our hand slapped a couple times, and we finally learned from that. And once we did, we ultimately believed that forging not only tucking your humility in the back seat and following what they're telling you to do, but building a strong relationship with the franchisor pays nothing but dividends
Mm-hmm.
because then you become a go-to person for them. And good franchisors, as we found, want input from their best franchisees. They're smart enough to understand that those royalties that you pay are paying their bills. And there's a collaboration that exists once you get by all the baloney and you start focusing on the reason why you signed up to do multi-units, which is to build a business of tremendous wealth and partnering with the franchisors. So I would say those are the two things. Stay involved as an owner in some capacity and follow the darn playbook. It's just the way to go. And if you don't want to do it, you're not going to be satisfied in your decision in being franchised.
So many answers are follow the playbook, right? And it's like you probably know a lot of franchisees successful, a lot of them struggle, and then the successful ones buy out the struggling ones. all they do is operate, and those store sales go right up.
And
But when
it's right. And we even saw it in Five Guys. You almost wanted some neighboring franchisee to not do it right because you knew that those stores would become available for pennies on the dollar, right?
Mhm.
So, and they do. And I can remember people saying, you know what, I'm not going to buy my onions from Cisco. I'm going to buy them from the black market onion guy on the corner. And it just didn't work. And
Didn't work.
you would tell them that, but at the end of the day, you only can be responsible. It was hard enough running a restaurant chain with 14 restaurants. Didn't need to worry about what other franchisees were doing as long as they weren't doing anything dramatically detrimental to the brand.
Well, is it safe to say that after you guys made your initial investment, got your store open, that you self-funded growth? And if so, I mean, that's easier said than done. So how did you do that? And what can people learn from you so that someone who might be thinking I could only afford 3 unit territory actually by good operations could go to 30 units without any more
Absolutely.
money out of their pocket?
Absolutely. And I think if you start putting more money into it, it's kind of going backwards for you. But, and again, there was certain luck that happened. This was around, we opened our first one in '08, I think it was. It was right with a real estate crisis. And, the banks weren't really lending money. So it was a really kind of a tough time where we got lucky. And this is another piece of advice I would give to people who are looking into getting into franchising. Pick your franchisor correctly. Five Guys was an institution in the Mid-Atlantic states, and they had great banking relationships. BB&T was the one that they introduced us to. BB&T, because they knew how powerful Five Guys was as a brand and what the unit economics were, they were willing to lend money to dopes up in Boston trying to do this business without any experience or any track record of running successful restaurants or QSRs. So we had to put some money into the first one, clearly, because you have to put some skin in the game, but minimal amounts. I'm trying to go back. I think the all in on the first build out was 600 grand. My partners and I, we raised enough money to fund all the fees and the first build out, and we got 50% of that money from BB&T on our first unit, and it did fantastic. And the rest of the time, it was make sure we give them enough notice so they can write a check for us for the next ones to build, and it was that simple. And if I could run the math here for you, which I think is interesting, so $600,000 per location times 13 locations, what's that? $6.5 million. So we borrowed $6.5 million. We put in our original, call it 800,000. Never wrote another check. Never put a dollar in. When we sold our business, we only owed the bank 800 grand.
Yeah, because all you paid all that back. You had paid all that back. Yeah. And
So we were able to do it without putting any money in. And then we also were able to almost fulfill all our bank responsibilities prior to selling the business.
yeah, your covenants along the way. What does Five Guys do right to make you want to keep opening? And so think about a guy, if you're coaching a guy to buy a franchise, I mean, you've got to help steer them into a brand where they're going to be so successful and so happy that they want to keep opening more and building a big business. I actually know franchise systems where the franchisees are successful, but they hate the franchisor and don't want to build anymore. They go look for another concept. But any advice or any thoughts of why Five Guys was so good? There's so many big franchisees in Five Guys. So why are people still care about that brand after all this time?
Well, I can only speak for ourselves. And, we learned a long time ago, you can't get overly emotional about any business situation at all, even though sometimes it's harder to do. But when we did our pro forma, Dan, when we were building our business, our CFO helped us with it. Conservatively, we said we should get our payback on our build out in a year to 15 months. Conservatively. We opened our first Five Guys and we paid ourselves back in about 7 or 8 weeks. So the results were so far outstanding to what we thought they were going to be that even if we hated these folks, we were going to build another one because the results were so amazing. Now, what happened is as time went by and we operated the business, other franchisees came into the territory. They started building. So when there were 3 or 4 Five Guys in all of Massachusetts, we were doing $60,000, $70,000 of business a week. once they got saturated and 5 years went down and there were 40 or 50 of them and we had 13 of them, of course the sales results went
Yeah.
down and it
Yeah.
wasn't
But
as
you got all your
exciting.
money back by then.
We got all our money back. And
Yeah.
again, the amount of locations that were built, they slowed down too, because you're
Yeah.
not going to keep that pace. But when we sold our business in 2018, 2019, early 2018 or 19, I forget now. But we had a lease. We were a month away from building our 14th location, so we weren't slowing down. We were
Yeah.
just you could afford to be a little bit more selective at that point.
Yeah.
And we were, like I said, we sold our business. We sold 13 restaurants and a 14th lease ready to go.
All my money is come from selling something. Like I've sold a business, because if I just have a good year, I just spend more. But it's selling something, and a lot of people forget that when you have a franchise. Like people think they're buying a franchise just to make cash or cash flow, which you are. The second bite of the apple is when you sell your business, right? So like you were successful enough, lucky enough to have a nice exit. And so, yeah, I mean, I would coach any franchisee. It's like, think about the end in mind. If you're starting with the franchise, think about the day you're going to sell it and then work backwards. It'll make you
Exactly.
make smarter decisions with your team and investing in good real estate, not cheap real estate, and hiring the better ops guy, not the cheapest ops guy, and whatever. But any other tricks or tips that you have for, what made you guys successful that someone can learn about? Like, how about real estate or building teams that perform? 60 grand a week in sales is a lot. That's hard for a staff to put up with. So like,
It's
how did you do it?
well, a couple comments. What you just said, the reverse engineering is really important. We knew when we started this what our end game was, when we wanted to get out, how quickly we wanted to build the locations, and if everything went according to plan, we had that figured out right away. We also weren't greedy, right? So we didn't take all the profits and give them out, and then there was nothing left to build the next location. So smart business decisions were part of it. Real estate. We hired a really good real estate guy. We also listened
A
to what
broker, a broker? You mean like a third party broker?
yes, I'm sorry, a broker.
And the only reason I interrupted you is because those people are paid by the landlords, right? They're paid. You don't pay them; they're paid by the landlords,
They are
and it's
paid
like,
completely by the landlord, and not until the lease gets signed. So
and
they
I
stay
can't tell
hungry.
you, I can't tell you how many people like, no, I'm going to do the real estate myself and save the commission. It's like, moron. It's not. You're not paying it. It's come from the landlord. You may as well get somebody that can use really good data, has contacts to help you get home run locations. That's how you guys did 60 grand a week in sales with good locations too.
Exactly right. And Five Guys and other franchisors, they have a model on real estate, and they say, "Here's what you're looking for." So we followed that. It also helped that we went into locations that Panera Bread and Chipotle were also in, and
Mhm.
they spend billions of dollars in real estate. So if they thought the location was good, yeah, well, we thought it was as well.
And they
But what
bring
you're saying about
customers.
the real estate broker is true. They know what's available. They know things that are coming aboard. Why you wouldn't hire a real estate broker to help you makes no sense to me. It's just something that it's like anything else. You're not getting into franchising because you're an expert at the concept, nor are you experts at real estate. So we found a good partner, and we actually struggled a little bit initially because Five Guys wasn't known up here in the Boston area. So we had a lot of landlords say, "Who the hell is that?"
Oh,
Um, but still, we were strong. We had good financials as a partnership group, and we actually utilized the franchisor in many ways. I can remember a couple times the real estate guy from Five Guys would come up. He'd come into our territory with us because we asked him to, and that collaboration really helped us. And we of all 13 locations, all but one was considerably higher than the annual unit volume of the chain. So we
yeah.
picked really good home run locations.
That helps because it costs the same amount of money to build a restaurant that does 20 grand a week as it does 60 grand.
Sure
Like that
does.
sign, that toilet in the bathroom, that, POS system costs the same if you're doing 20 grand a week or 60 grand a week. So you
Got
may
that
as well
right.
take the time. And the difference in the 60 grand is how much more cash you make every year times 10 years. And then when you go to sell, it's, 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 it's huge difference in picking the good sites. Good sites also mean you don't have to market as much. If you pick a good location and you're on this busiest intersection where everyone's coming anyways. It's like you don't have to teach anyone. They already know. They're already coming there, right? So it's, I don't know, there's
Exactly.
all kinds of reasons to
And,
pick
and,
good
and you
franchises.
know, the other thing I would say on that is, and you kind of touched on it a few minutes ago, you can't be penny wise and pound foolish either, right? You can't say to yourself, I'm not going to spend more than $30 a square foot. That's my limit. And then you're going to be next to, the worst location in the world. We were opposite. We paid top dollar for space because you were getting what you paid for. To your point, you're going to get the end cap in the high end mall versus not an end cap in line in some place that no one's going. So we would always say to our broker, find us the best spots. Don't worry about price per square foot. Because again, if you're doing $60,000 a week, there's plenty of money to pay everybody off with a lot to spare. So
Yeah,
we did that with real estate and with our people. We paid a lot of money for top level managers, and that way they were completely satisfied. But we also were able to hold them accountable and get to our results a lot
mhm.
quicker.
Yeah, on the real estate side, I mean, you don't really, good real estate's not expensive. Only bad real estate's expensive, right?
That's very
Like
funny.
bad real estate's, you can't, rent can't be low enough for bad real estate. Like
That's a
it's
good
a
point.
dog. Good real estate pays you. I mean, it pays you a lot. And then I'm glad you said that about the people. Like I fully, early on in my career, you sort of pay people what it takes to get them or to keep them, and you're not really thinking about anything else until all of a sudden they leave, and then you start learning, sadly, the hard cost of turnover, right? The hard cost of turnover. And my customers aren't coming back as much because their last experience is like, do it right, get the right team. You're spending all that marketing money and the real estate to get people to come in to your concept. Is like, the experience got to be good. They got options.
Absolutely. If I could tell you a quick little anecdote to
Yeah.
make that point, we were we had signed our first lease, and it was our first location opened up in April, so we were going to be doing construction through the winter. So we didn't even have an office, right? We had nothing, and we wanted to find our. To your point, we weren't going to hire a general manager. We were going to hire a very high powered regional director of operations, even though we didn't need a regional director of operations for one restaurant. But we were
Yeah.
going to pay that person, that way he could build the company and he would grow into that role versus somebody that we know we would have had to replace anyway.
Yeah.
So my partner and I met this candidate at anybody who's from the Massachusetts area will know the old Sheraton Tara Framingham Hotel. It looked like a castle on Route 9. And we met him in the lobby. And so we're ready to come meet with this guy. Here's a guy who had 25 years at Outback. I mean, he polished guy, knew the business. And my partner and I never worked at a restaurant a day in our lives, didn't have a location, didn't even have an office. All we were able to do was offer him some really crappy coffee from the vending machine. Anyway, the point was, we said to ourselves before the meeting, we have to understand that there is really no reason at all for this guy to come work for us if we really like him. What's he going to do? Go back to his wife and say, I've been working here as a managing partner for Outback for 25 years. I'm making $150,000 a year. I'm going to take a job for 80 grand to go work for a concept that's got no locations for two dumb owners who've never done this before. Like, that's just not going to work. So we had to understand, if we wanted the guy, we had to pay. So we overpaid drastically for him, but this guy got us to 9 locations, and we wouldn't have been successful without him. So
Yeah.
that's a lesson there. Don't if you're trying to build a business that's going to be worth millions of dollars, why would you chintz out on a little bit of money for the people that are going to be doing the job for you? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make any logical sense.
In the big scheme of things, paying what it takes just to get them and paying enough so that they never leave and that they outperform is tens of thousands a year. It's not hundreds of thousands, it's
No,
tens of
it's
thousands.
it's
But
not.
but the difference in the aggregate between all your extra profit and eventually your second bite of the apple is millions of dollars
Millions.
for, yeah.
And we
So
actually, after we realized how good he was, we wrote him a contract. He earned 0.5% equity a year for the next 5 years. So when we sold this business, he was 2.5% owner and
got a
deserved
check.
every
Yeah.
single penny. And not one of my partners was lamenting about that 2.5%. It was money
Yeah.
well spent. We would have
Yeah.
done it again.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, so let's shift gears a little bit. So
Mhm.
your new gig. So
Yeah.
you got into franchise consulting, which I love.
Yep.
What I really love about that for you is a lot, I mean, not to throw stones, but a lot of brokers haven't done what you've done. A lot
Right?
of
They haven't.
brokers are trying to get a deal done. You're different because you realize getting the deal done is only the first yard line going the opposite direction, right? Like you're net, but you've got really good advice,
Yes.
whether someone's buying food or non-food. It's the same strategic academic about compounding something small into something huge. So, I mean, tell me about why you decided to do that and what's your plan?
It takes a lot out of you. I mean, I'm 61 years old. It takes a lot out of you to be a multi-unit anything. It's exhausting and it's draining. We sold our business right before the pandemic. We dabbled
Good
around with a
job.
couple
Good
other.
job.
I'm sorry.
Good job.
Very again, luck paid that off. We didn't see the pandemic coming. We dabbled around with a couple other maybe buyers selling this business or maybe getting involved in this franchise. Um, but honestly, I didn't personally have the desire to do it all over again. But I love the franchising business. I don't want to not work. And I've known you for many, many years. I've met some of the people that work for you. I've known some of the people over at Franchisor for a while. I just started talking to them. And I found that it just, if I could put myself in a position where I could use my experience as a franchisee and help people find that opportunity for themselves, it could just be life changing, Dan. Right? I mean, these people who become as we did. You go, we weren't down and out poor people, but we were working in an environment that we would have been working in that same environment for the next 30 years of our lives. And when you find the right opportunity, it's life changing. And I just wanted the opportunity to help people get there because I believe I have that experience that someone who's interested in the franchising, they're nervous, they're trepidatious, they're investing a lot of money. And if I can talk to somebody and say, I'm in the same boat you are, it kind of makes them feel like they got a partner in their business, even though clearly I'm not. And I've only been at it for a short period of time, but I'm already getting a kick out of it because to be able to use something that you've learned successfully and help others, I think it's a nice culmination of my career when it's all said and done. So that's why I chose it. And so far, I'm glad I did. I got to get a little bit more momentum, but that'll come in time. You
Good.
can't
Well,
get to the
good.
top overnight.
No, I'm glad for you because my mantra is I want to get wealthy helping people get wealthy. I don't want to make money at the idea of you losing a home or something like that. Like I want to get rich helping people get rich.
Sure.
Franchising is the perfect equalizer. It only works if everybody's making money. And so, but if I lined up like all the brokers I've ever met in my life, and most of them don't have your experience. They're good at, they tell stories about it, franchise businesses are like ATM machines. They run themselves passive. That's all nonsense. And so, the good news for you is I think that you're going to be able to give somebody really good practical advice to succeed in franchising and
Yeah,
tell people no.
I think you're right. And I'm also at a point of, I'd like to say, a certain level of maturity that I'm not going to convince you. Dan, I'm not going to convince you that you should be investing in franchises for a career because that's not what I want to do. But if you believe it's something that's going to be worthwhile for you and you have the wherewithal to do it, then I'll work with you, hand in hand as long as it takes because I know what the results are going to be. So I don't even really consider what I do selling because I'm the only
Yeah.
sale is made between the franchisor and the franchisee. I just kind of guide them through the process and I'm there to answer questions. And if I do a really good job, I get my candidates calling me saying, "Hey, Mark, I got a meeting with the franchisor tomorrow. Would you join? Because I'd like you to be there. Or would you mind if I called you after and I want to bounce some things off you?" That's the fulfilling side for me. If they sign a deal and I get a commission, well, that's good too, because we're not working, we're not doing all philanthropy here. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's very gratifying, which is why I chose to get involved with this. And the FranServe guys are very professional. I like them very much. They've got a really robust platform, over 800 franchise concepts. So, you did talk, you and I are talking about multi-unit, big ticket kind of stuff, but you can get there by buying one territory at a time. So
Yeah.
some of these
Yeah.
people that I've spoken to who, maybe they only thought that if I buy a franchise, I'm going to be like, Chuck in the truck. I'm going to buy a job, which is true, but they don't see the reality that they can turn that truck into 6 trucks and they can turn that territory into 8 territories. And once they start seeing that, they don't really need my guidance anymore because they're ready to take it and run with it.
Yeah. Well, you have a roadmap. So you have a roadmap, the same roadmap that's why I gave you that advice way back when, for you to start off small and parlay and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Like you didn't take, you didn't pay for 20 stores the first year, right? You let the profit grow. You could have done that to 50 units, 80 units. You
We
could
sure
have
could
done it
have.
with 4 different
We
brands,
sure
right?
could have.
And so I've done 5,000 franchises around the world, and that's how we do it. Is we do it where no matter where you are, I want to help you get 10 times bigger than you're even thinking. Always in franchise organizations, the big multi-unit franchisees usually started off as operators. So you could be a small, start with 1 or 2, and if the best operator buys out the worst operator. It's not necessarily the biggest buys out the smallest. The best operator buys. So anyway, so I think you have a lot to offer. I think you're going to bring a lot to the table, not only helping someone find the right franchise and explaining what they're really getting themselves into and how to pick one that will compound growth, but you're an advisor. Like someone could email you or call you along their journey, and you're
Sure.
going to give them practical advice all the way till when they eventually sell their business.
Absolutely.
So good on you.
I hope I don't. I hope my relationship with my candidates don't end when they sign on the dotted line, because again, I think it's just the beginning of the process for any really good franchisees. They should have that. What am I in this for? And again, there's also nothing wrong. I don't want to. I'm not trying to be disparaging. If all you want to do is buy yourself a job, that's fine too. And you can do a lot worse than buying a franchise because you've got that support on the back end. But I think you're just missing so much of the opportunity if you go in that narrow-minded and I'm just going to do this one thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your willingness to share your experience with other people. That's what we're trying to do here. So I appreciate it. We're going to follow your journey, and hopefully you will join us again so we can keep talking about this.
Be
Thank you
really
very
happy
much.
to. Thank you very much, Dan. I really owe you a lot of gratitude as well. You've helped us out a lot along the way, so thank you.